Well, good day again. It is October the 18th, and I want to welcome everybody again to Search for Signs. My name is Gary Willing. Now, in the last video I put up, I tried to answer the first of two questions that Guadalupe Fernandez Soberón asked. And in this video, I'm trying to answer the second question. So, the second question he's asking, what name does he use when he speaks on television, is hands down one of the more popular questions I get. And I get it from two different types of people. Okay, so I get one from people who have perhaps heard this information for years and are starting to be frustrated that they still haven't recognized him on TV and are starting to doubt whether or not what Benjamin Creme was saying was true. Okay, which is legitimate. I understand why they're getting frustrated about it. And then I also get this question from people who view and think Maitreya is the Antichrist, and then they get frustrated with me for not telling them because they think I'm playing some kind of games with them, which I'm not. Okay, so I'll try to explain why I don't mention who he is, and then we'll kind of expound upon it a little bit more if you don't mind, and then it will kind of hopefully get a better sense of it. But for those of us who have known this information for a long time, Benjamin Creme had been saying for decades that sooner or later Maitreya was going to come out on TV. It was eventuality, it would happen. There were times when it could have happened and it was getting really, really close, and then something happened and he wasn't able to get on TV. And then eventually Benjamin Creme made the announcement in January of 2010 that Maitreya actually had made his first television interview, and since then has done interviews all the time on television, but yet people still really aren't recognizing him as Maitreya because he's not claiming to be a Messiah figure or the Christ come back or anything really. He's just presenting himself as an ordinary person. Now, Benjamin Creme, at the time that he was making these announcements, and even during some of the conferences when he was talking about Maitreya, about to make his television appearance, he was very stern with the groups that to not point out when we recognize Maitreya on TV, not to point out to any of our family or friends or anyone that is who Maitreya is on TV and that's the name of which he's using. And we're also not supposed to say that's not Maitreya when people start guessing. Now, he was saying that eventually people would start to recognize Maitreya more and more and more as time goes on, because Maitreya would start to make it easier for people to recognize him, because he would start to speak in a way that it would start to trigger that, oh, I heard about that, or I remember reading something back in the day, from this guy named Benjamin Creme, and blah 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 blah. Right? It would start to click, I guess. Well, that time still hasn't happened yet, and I think there's a reason why, and I think it's because humanity is not quite ready for that yet. But he's only being presented in that way in order to gently, quietly wake people up without frightening them too much. And it also lends it more for the response of the people hearing his message in the way that he's saying it, to give more of an honest response to what he's saying. And what I mean by that is they would agree with what he has to say and the need to follow his suggestion honestly, and not because they think he is the Christ come back. Where if he had made claims to be the Christ, there would be a certain segment of people that would believe it just because he said it with the energy behind what he said, if that makes any sense. So it's better to have an honest assessment of what he's saying. So when you do recognize Maitreya, it will be sincere on your end. You'll recognize him for who he is based on your own spiritual recognition of who he is. And if somebody like myself or anybody else were to say that person's Maitreya, well, then I would rob you of that experience. I would also be robbing you of the honest reaction to what he has to say. And then you might follow him based on what even I said him to be. Does that make sense? So it's important for us not to do that. In fact, actually, Benjamin Creme went as far to say when people do start to ask you, because he said they will, to simply ask them in return, what do you think? And then let them come up with it on their own. So if you look historically at Jesus's role, for instance. Now, Maitreya is not Jesus, but if you look at the way that he was, his life fulfilled the predictions that the Jewish people were hoping for, but yet didn't fulfill their expectations. That's why they missed him. It's kind of the same thing today. You know, he's fulfilling the predictions and the prophecies of these religious groups, but he's not fulfilling their expectations. And he's really not even fulfilling the expectations of his return of the people who knew about it through Benjamin Creme. So why? Because he wants you to have an honest reaction to what he's saying, to have an honest approach to it, so he can have an honest discussion with you where you don't look up to him. You're seeing him as an equal, but yet responding to what he's saying and how he's saying it, because you want for the world what he's advocating for the world. That's the importance of it. So the other thing I want to say about this question is it's not always going to be like this. There's going to be a time when Maitreya actually does come forward and actually say who he is. But it's going to be at the time that we all see it together and we're all on the same page at the same time. So it's not going to just be a couple million people here or a few million people here that hear it. It's going to be everyone around the world is going to know at the same time who he is and why he's here. It's going to look kind of like this. The interest in in who he is as a person on TV will start to grow. Now, right now, there might be some interest, but it's not a global interest. So there might be some individuals here or there, small groups here or there that are starting to pick up that he might be Maitreya. In fact, actually, Benjamin Creme's master said as such, that there are people starting to even pray to him now, but they're not speaking out about it. So, and there's probably reasons why. But anyway, the thing of it is that eventually that interest in who he is and especially what he's talking about and his priorities and stuff will create this tsunami of, and rather than being this little ripple, it's going to be a tsunami of interest into who he is and what he's about. And humanity will demand from the news media to allow him to speak to everyone. That's how this is going to come about. And then all the news media, CNN, BBC, Fox, NBC, CBS, PBS, all the major news networks will align together like they do when there's a major event. And he will give a press conference. He will come to the podium and he will start to speak, but he won't utter a word out loud. We'll hear his call to humanity inwardly in our own head, in our own language. You'll hear it in English if that was your first language that you learned. You'll hear it in another language if your mother tongue is another language or something. French and French, English and English, Russian and Russian, that kind of thing. If you're Japanese, you'll hear it in Japanese. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. You get what I'm saying. So there won't be any real misinterpretation of what he's saying based on language differences. And then it's been said he will explain from where humanity was and show us, in his words, how far humanity has fallen to the morass of materialism of which we are today, and how we're living, and really point and shed light on it in a way that only he can, about how far from where we should be living and where we're living today, and the danger in that. But then it's also been said that he will give us visions of, I'm assuming, of what the future will be like if we don't accept the principle of sharing. What will that look like for us? How will life end on this planet in that way? The pain, the suffering that we will feel by seeing this vision in a very real, clear, crisp way that we couldn't see by just somebody telling us this. We'll see it. And then he'll probably show us a vision of what life will be like if we just accept the principle of sharing. How glorious and how amazing it will be for not only in the very immediate time, but long term, what it's going to be like. And we'll see it all in the same way, with very little misinterpretation on what he's saying, I'm assuming. And then Even Maitreya said it will be as if he embraces humanity, will feel his energy even physically at the same time, and it will just be a moving experience that we cannot imagine. And then lastly, the last group of miracles will be that there will be millions of people who will be healed from terminal illnesses even, that will happen on that day. And of course they'll come and report on it, and they'll say, yes, I was on my deathbed, and we all experienced what we experienced, and now I'm out of the bed entirely. So, as Benjamin Creme liked to say at the end of every one of his lectures, he would say, for these 3 reasons, and only these 3 reasons, would you know that that man, and only that man, is the awaited teacher. So, that's what we have to look forward to. So, at some point, we will know. That's my point. Right now, we don't. And it's okay that we don't know what the name he's using. But it's also not okay to point it out when you do recognize him. But I do think this. I think that the majority of the people who have heard this information have already seen him on TV. We still haven't even recognized him. So, and then when we do recognize him, it will be a familiar person that we've kind of known about over the past few years. And we're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that was him. Because he might not look anything like what we're expecting him to look. So, hopefully that sheds some light on it. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.